Thumbs gave human ancestors a formidable advantage whether we're texting or using tools. Our hands, perhaps more than any other body part, are what equip us for modern life. The killer app in the evolution of our hands was our opposable thumbs, which allow humans to precisely hold tiny things between our fingertips and pad of our thumb. When did we first get this unusual manual dexterity? It had been thought, based on comparisons of fossilized bones to modern human skeletons, that it may have emerged more than 3 million years ago when our earliest ancestors, the australopithecines, such as the famous fossil Lucy, started using basic stone tools. A new approach to this question, however, suggests that while early hominins may have been dexterous, they did not have the powerful thumb typical of humans today until later. About 2 million years ago. It was at this time an early species of humans first left Africa, and our dexterity could have been the driving force behind a more complex human culture that emerged then. Increased manual dexterity in the form of efficient thumb opposition was among the early defining characteristics of our lineage, providing a formidable adaptive advantage to our ancestors, said paleoanthropologist Katarina Harvati, a professor at Eberhard Karls University of Tübingen in Germany and lead author of a new study that published in the journal Current Biology. It is likely a crucial element underlying the development of complex culture over the last 2 million years, shaping our biocultural evolution. The researchers estimated how powerful the thumb was in some of our fossil human relatives by virtually modeling a muscle in the thumb that is important for opposability and the motion that brings the thumb into contact with other fingers. This involved comparing the grip of recent and early modern humans, living chimpanzees, and 6 different hominin species. Those 6 species include one of the earliest, Australopithecus afarensis Lucy, and more recent archaic humans, such as Neanderthals, who existed before in some cases, alongside early Homo sapiens in the centuries and millennia before we emerged as the lone hominin survivor. The scientists took into account soft tissue as well as bone anatomy. Until now, manual dexterity has mainly been assessed by simply comparing the fossils with the anatomy present in humans, and assuming that the more anatomically similar a fossil was to the modern human condition, the more similar in its dexterity and manual capacities, Harvati said via email. However, this view is relatively simplistic, as similar efficiency can be achieved by different forms, and also because it did not take into account the effect of muscles. The latter is extremely important, but of course is not preserved in the fossil record. The earliest stone tool makers from the Australopithecus family, who lived from around 2 million to 3.8 million years ago, did not have the heightened manual dexterity that later hominins did. The researchers found it would have been more difficult to make precise movements such as holding a pen for writing. But these australopithecines would have been able to use tools such as sticks and unmodified rocks, a bit like chimpanzees do in the wild. The phalanges, finger bones, of australopithecine hands were generally longer and more curved than those of modern humans, though not as much as living great apes. So, they would probably be able to shake your hand, but it would likely make a noticeable difference, Harvati said. The researchers' results suggested that the powerful thumb that characterizes the human hand evolved only in some fossil hominin species around 2 million years ago. At this time, Homo erectus emerged, the earliest humans to have body proportions similar to Homo sapiens and the first to disperse from Africa, as well as evidence of systematic butchering of hunted animals in use of aquatic resources. Stone tools also got more sophisticated and were used more habitually, widening early human diets. Of course, it is not possible to show a direct association, Harvati said, but we do see increased cultural complexity through time in the fossil record after 2 million years or so, which is the age of the earliest fossil showing heightened thumb efficiency in our sample. This includes more systematic use of stone tools, the gradual development of more complex stone tool industries, the gradual increased reliance on animal resources, and, of course, The appearance of Homo erectus, a large-brained and larger-bodied hominin, whose geographic range expanded across Africa and Eurasia. The study also shed some light on Homo naledi, an enigmatic species of human relative first discovered in 2015 deep inside a cave system in South Africa. Little is known about the life of this human relative, and no tools have been associated with this species. Its small brain and mix of modern and ancient anatomy has long flummoxed scientists. Homo naledi had a fairly powerful thumb and would have been able to make and use stone tools, this study suggested. The study also found that Neanderthals and modern humans had a fairly similar levels of dexterity, suggesting it was inherited from a common ancestor. Tracy Cavell, a professor at the University of Kent's School of Anthropology and Conservation in the United Kingdom, who wasn't involved in the research, said a lot of assumptions need to be made in this kind of analysis because muscles are not preserved in the fossil record. It can, however, provide some useful insights and new ideas to test, she said. Cavell said the study authors did an excellent job of dealing with all of the complexities involved in this kind of research to make their results as robust as possible. Many primates are capable of precision and power grips. However, humans are capable for forceful pad-to-pad precision grips, for which a powerful thumb is a critical component, she said via email. It's often thought that this ability in humans evolved in response to tool use. Being able to efficiently make and use tools, stone, bone, plant-based tools would allow us to take advantage of new dietary resources that would otherwise be unavailable or take more time, energy to access. Older adults without family or friends lag in race to get coronavirus vaccines. The divide between haves and have-nots is emerging as older adults across the country struggle to get COVID-19 vaccines. Seniors with family members or friends to help them are getting vaccine appointments, even if it takes days to secure them. Those without reliable social supports are missing out. Elders who can drive, or who can get other people to drive them, are traveling to locations where vaccines are available, crossing city or county borders to do so. Those without private transportation are stuck with whatever is available nearby. Older adults who are comfortable with computers and have internet service are getting notices of vaccine availability and can register online for appointments. Those who can't afford broadband services or don't use computers or smartphone apps are likely missing out on information about vaccines and appointments. The extent of this phenomenon has not been documented yet, but experts are discussing it on various forums, as are older adults and family members. I'm very concerned that barriers to getting vaccines are having unequal impact on our older population, said Dr. Xin-Chi Dong, director of the Institute for Health Policy and Aging Research at Rutgers University. Disproportionately, these barriers appear to be affecting Blacks and Hispanic elders as well as people who are not native English speakers. Older adults living in low-income neighborhoods, seniors who are frail, seriously ill or homebound, and those with vision and hearing impairments. The question is, who's going to actually get vaccines? Older adults who are tech-savvy, with financial resources and family members to help them. Or harder-to-reach populations, said Abraham A. Flat-Brody, an associate professor of nursing and medicine at New York University. How older adults with chronic illnesses can assess whether to get the COVID-19 vaccine. How older adults with chronic illnesses can assess whether to get the COVID-19 vaccine if seniors of color and people living in poor neighborhoods can't find a way to get vaccines. You're going to see disparities that have surfaced during the pandemic widening, he said. Preliminary evidence from an analysis by KHN indicates this appears to be happening. In 23 states reporting vaccine data by race, Blacks are being vaccinated at a far lower rate than whites based on their share of the population. The data on Hispanics suggests similar disparities but is incomplete. Although the data is not age-adjusted, Black and Hispanic seniors have been far more likely to become seriously ill and die from COVID than white seniors during the pandemic, other evidence shows. Myrna Hart, 79, who has diabetes and high blood pressure and lives in Cottage Grove, Minnesota, a southern suburb of St. Paul, is afraid she'll be left behind during the vaccine rollout. Hart, who is Black, is eager to get a shot, but she can't travel to two large vaccination sites for seniors in Minneapolis' northern suburbs more than 30 miles away. "That's too far for me to drive. I don't know my way. And I could get lost," she said. "If they have a handful of people who look like me in those places, I would be surprised. I wouldn't feel safe going there by myself. Family members can't give her a ride." Hart's husband is in a skilled nursing facility, receiving rehabilitation after having a leg amputated due to diabetes. Her son is in the hospital with complications from kidney disease. A daughter lives in Westchester County, New York. So far, Hart has had no success getting an appointment online at smaller, closer vaccine locations. "I don't know how much I can endure this," she said, her voice breaking, as she described her fear of catching COVID and her frustration. "I'm afraid they're going to run out of vaccine before they get to people my age. Now that they've changed the plan to include 65-year-olds who are jumping ahead of us, like many states, Minnesota widened eligibility to people 65 and older in mid-January, following recommendations from the federal government." Although Hart, a former accountant and bookstore owner, knows her way around computers, many older adults don't. According to a new survey by University of Michigan researchers, nearly 50% of Black seniors and 53% of Hispanic older adults did not have online patient portal accounts with their healthcare providers as of June 2020, compared with 39% of white elders. What's more, a significant portion of Black and Hispanic older adults lack internet access, 25% and 21%, respectively, according to the Census Bureau. It's not enough to offer technological solutions to these seniors. They need someone, an adult child, a grandchild, an advocate, who can help them engage with the healthcare system and get these vaccines, said Dr. Preeti Malani, director of the University of Michigan's National Poll on Healthy Aging. In Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Anand Iyer, a pulmonologist who specializes in caring for older adults, runs a clinic for more than 200 indigent patients with various types of chronic lung disease, conditions that put them at risk of becoming seriously ill if they're infected with coronavirus. 70% of his patients are Black, and many are elderly. "I would estimate 10% to 20% are at risk of missing out on vaccines because they're homebound, live alone, don't have transportation, or lack reliable social connections," he said. "Unfortunately, those are the same factors that put them at risk of poor outcomes from COVID." Every week, he gets a call from a 90-year-old Black patient who lives alone in Tuskegee with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, heart failure, cancer, and severe arthritis. "She's old, but she's resilient and she keeps me posted on what's going on," Iyer said. To the doctor's knowledge, this patient doesn't have children, other family members, or friends to help her. Instead, she relies on a handyman who comes around every so often. "How in the world is she supposed to get the vaccine?" he wondered. Kei Hoshino Quigley, 42, of New York City, knows that her parents, Japanese-American immigrants, who have lived with her since last March, couldn't have managed without her help. Although Quigley's 70-year-old father and 80-year-old mother speak English, they have heavy accents and it can be very hard for people to understand them, she said. In addition, Quigley's father doesn't know how to use computers, and her mother's eyesight isn't good. For older people who don't speak English as their native language and who are intimidated by the computer, the systems that have been set up are just nuts, Quigley said. Knowing they couldn't navigate vaccine registration systems on their own, Quigley spent hours online trying to secure appointments for her parents. After encountering a host of problems, frequent error messages, information she inputted suddenly getting wiped out on vaccine registration sites, calendars with disappearing by the second appointments, incorrect notices that her parents didn't qualify. Quigley arranged for her mother to be vaccinated in mid-January and for her father to get his first shot a few weeks later. Language issues are also a significant hurdle for older Hispanics, who are not being offered information on vaccines in a way they understand or in Spanish, said Yanira Cruz, President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Hispanic Council on Aging. I'm very concerned that older adults who are not fluent in English, who don't have a family member to help them navigate online, and who don't have access to private transportation are going to be left out during this rollout, she said. None of the older adults living in two low-income housing complexes run by our organization in Washington, D.C., and Garden City, Kansas, have received vaccines, Cruz said. We should be bringing the vaccines to where seniors live, not asking them to take a bus, expose themselves to other people, and try to find their way to a clinic, she said. Nothing can substitute for a friend or family member determined to make sure an older loved one is protected against COVID. Joanna Stolove has played that role for her father, 82, who is blind and has congestive heart failure, and her mother, 74, who has Lewy body dementia. The couple lives in Nassau County on New York's Long Island and receives 40 hours of care at home each week. Stolove, a geriatric social worker, took time during work to try to get her father an appointment, but many people don't have that luxury. She works at a naturally occurring retirement community in Morningside Heights, a diverse neighborhood on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. With substantial effort, Stolove secured an appointment for her father at a large drive-in vaccine site on Jones Beach on January 26. Her sister found an appointment for her mother there in late February. At work, where many of her clients live alone and don't have family members or friends whom they can rely on for help, she counsels them about vaccines and tries to find appointments on their behalf. I have so many advantages in assisting my parents, Stolove said. Without help from someone like me, how can people find their way through this? Fact check. No, Biden didn't say that signing lots of executive orders makes you a dictator. President Joe Biden has signed more than 35 executive orders, actions and memorandums in his first week and a half in the Oval Office. And some of Biden's critics are saying or suggesting that his frequent early use of the presidential pen contradicts a dramatic statement he made on the campaign trail in October. Biden signed off on a record number of executive orders during his first week, but just 3 months ago, according to Biden himself. That's something only a dictator would do, Fox News host Sean Hannity said on air Tuesday. As recently as October. Now President Biden said you can't legislate by executive action unless you're a dictator. Well, in 1 week, he's signed more than 30 unilateral actions. And working Americans are getting short shrift, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said Thursday in the Senate. By his own definition, Biden is already governing like a dictator. Read a headline on an opinion column in The Hill by commentator Joe Concha. Biden signs more executive orders despite claims he once said they were for dictators, read a headline in the conservative Washington Examiner. Joe Biden admits he is governing like a dictator, said a caption posted on Instagram by Charlie Kirk, founder and president of conservative student group Turning Point USA. Facts first. These Biden critics are taking his dictator remark out of context. Biden explicitly campaigned on signing various executive orders, including those to rescind some of then-President Donald Trump's own executive orders, and he didn't say in October that signing a large number of orders means a president is a dictator. Rather, after Biden rejected the idea of using an executive order to raise taxes on corporations and wealthy people, he said there are things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. In other words, Biden was saying what he had said before and has said since, that executive orders are unconstitutional for some particular purposes. In an email, McConnell spokesman David Pop forcefully rejected CNN's conclusion that McConnell had inaccurately characterized Biden's dictator remark. Pop said that given the full text of what Biden said in October, and other campaign comments Biden made about his belief in a consensus-seeking philosophy of governing, your fact-check doesn't check out Biden's comments. Biden argued during the campaign that other politicians, including some of his rivals in the Democratic primary, were proposing to use executive orders in situations where orders could not properly be used. He told the New York Times editorial board in December 2019 that it would be unconstitutional to sign an executive order to ban possession of assault weapons or to make substantial changes to the judiciary. At an ABC News town hall event in Philadelphia in October 2020, Biden was asked by host George Stephanopoulos if it is wise to carry out his proposals to raise taxes on corporations and the wealthy at a time when the economy is weak. After Biden defended his plan, Stephanopoulos said, "So there's not going to be any delay on the tax increases." Biden responded, "No, well, I've gotta get the votes. I gotta get the votes. That's why, the one thing that I have this strange notion. We are a democracy. Some of my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends even occasionally say, well, if you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus." This was familiar Biden rhetoric. Like his previous comments to the Times, the dictator remark was a criticism of proposals to use executive orders for initiatives that require congressional approval, not an assertion that signing a lot of executive orders is inherently tyrannical. Pop argued that Biden's subsequent sentence about the need for consensus shows that he was making a broad statement about his philosophy of governing, not just speaking narrowly about executive orders for a change to tax policy. And Pop noted that Biden had repeatedly spoken, including in the Times interview, about the importance of bringing people together and working through Congress. That's fair enough. But McConnell still went too far when he implied that Biden signing a bunch of executive orders means he contradicted the dictator comment in particular. There's also some additional important context. Biden's campaign promises multiple Biden executive orders simply rescind policies Trump had imposed throughout his own executive orders without public complaint from McConnell and other Biden critics. And critically, Biden promised during the campaign that he would sign significant executive orders. In fact, many of Biden's early presidency executive orders fulfill explicit campaign pledges. For example, Biden signed a series of orders aimed at combating climate change, just as his campaign climate plan, which is still on his website, said he would on day one. Biden will sign a series of new executive orders with unprecedented reach that go well beyond the Obama-Biden administration platform and put us on the right track. Biden's order to rescind Trump's ban on transgender people serving openly in the military was another campaign promise. So were his orders to preserve the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals (DACA) immigration program Trump tried to eliminate to pursue a Buy American purchasing policy, to halt Trump's withdrawal from the World Health Organization and rescind Trump's Muslim-focused travel ban. After a Washington Examiner correspondent brought up the dictator comment on Thursday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki noted to reporters that Biden has also proposed major legislation on pandemic relief and immigration. She said Biden is going to use the levers that every president in history has used, executive actions. But he also feels it's important to work with Congress, and not just one party, but both parties, to get things done. A second grader at a Christian school was expelled for telling another girl she had a crush on her. Mother says an 8-year-old student was kicked out of a Christian elementary school after she told another female student she had a crush on her, the mother says. The incident occurred last week, when Chloe Shelton, a second grader at Rejoice Christian School in Owasso, Oklahoma, told another female student she had a crush on her. Mother Delaney Shelton told CNN. Chloe was immediately removed from the playground and spent the next few hours in the principal's office, missing class time as a result, Shelton said. Before I was even called, the vice principal told Chloe that the Bible says that women can only have children with a man, Shelton told CNN. The vice principal asked me how I feel about girls liking girls, and I told her that I see no issue with it. Shelton took Chloe home that day, and administrators told her to not come back Friday, she said. The next day, the superintendent called Shelton, saying that the school was ending their partnership with Shelton's family. She told CNN, also expelling her 5-year-old son. When Shelton asked for specifics, he said her beliefs didn't align with theirs, she said. I was so blindsided. I was angry, hurt, betrayed, sad, so many different emotions. I just couldn't believe it, Shelton said. I asked him to have a sit-down meeting to discuss it and process it better, and he refused, saying that nothing more needed to be discussed. In a statement to CNN, Superintendent Joel Pepin declined to publicly comment, stating, due to privacy and other factors, it is the school's policy to refrain from public comments regarding any particular student or family. Sexual immorality is grounds for dismissal. Handbook states. The school's handbook states that any form of sexual immorality goes against its beliefs, including professing to be homosexual, bisexual. Students who do not conform to the standards and ideals of work and life at the school forfeit the privilege of attendance, the handbook states. Students are also not allowed to have public displays of affection, including holding hands, hugging, or kissing, the handbook states. Pregnancy is also grounds for dismissal, though the student may instead be placed on homebound, so other students aren't drawn by bad example to do likewise. Shelton said she hadn't explicitly read the handbook when she first enrolled Chloe in the school as a 4-year-old for PK. But she also didn't know that 4 years later, Chloe would say she had a crush on another girl. It wasn't a relationship nor a practice, Shelton said, referencing the rules in the handbook. Just a crush. To an 8-year-old, that could just mean that she really enjoys playing on the playground with her. Meanwhile, Chloe was initially devastated last week, crying and asking her mother if God still loved her. Chloe has received hundreds encouraging letters from across U.S. Kylie Holden, 26, is an alum of the school, spending years from kindergarten to 12th grade at RCS before graduating in 2012. She identifies as bisexual. Amidst threats of expulsion, Holden said her friends waited until they graduated to come out. So when she heard about Chloe's experience, those memories came flooding back. The idea that Chloe was questioning whether she deserved love from God or anyone shook her. That's the kind of detrimental stuff that you deal with for the rest of your life, she told CNN. Holden posted about it on Facebook, offering to put together care packages for the family. People from Canada to Louisiana, most of whom have never met Chloe or have any connection to the school, have reached out, offering to send money, gifts or cards affirming Chloe. I just don't want her to feel like we did, Holden said. I don't want her to grow up thinking that she is not worthwhile, because that is not true. So far, Chloe has received more than 150 messages from people all over the U.S. saying how proud they are of her and assuring her she is loved by them and God, Shelton said. She's feeling so loved and supported now because of so many amazing people that have reached out to us, she said. She's excited for a fresh start at a new school. A Georgia city is replacing a Confederate monument with a statue of civil rights hero John Lewis for 112 years. A 30-foot obelisk stood outside the courthouse grounds in the suburban Atlanta city of Decatur, erected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. It suggested the Civil War was about states' rights and Southern honor, instead of the real root caused slavery. That structure was finally taken down last year, and in its place, Officials now plan to erect a monument that honors the late John Lewis, a man who spent his entire life fighting for civil rights. It is the latest chapter in a years-long battle the city has waged to rid itself of this symbol in its town square, a symbol it considered a dark legacy of slavery. Decatur is a liberal enclave in the predominantly African-American county, DeKalb. But it also lies in a state that, in 2019, passed a law protecting Confederate monuments, saying they honored history and heritage. First came the plaque hamstrung by state law. DeKalb County officials first installed a bronze plaque next to the obelisk to counter the narrative it pushed. The 184-word statement didn't mince words. The monument, it said, bolstered white supremacy and faulty history. This monument and similar ones also were created to intimidate African Americans, it added. That's how things stayed, until last year when, compelled by the killing of George Floyd, America took a long, hard look at race and injustice. In city after city, Confederate monuments toppled. Then came the removal as protests rocked the nation. Decatur argued the monument had become a threat to public safety. A judge agreed. The Confederate obelisk has become an increasingly frequent target of graffiti and vandalism, a figurative lightning rod for friction among citizens, and a potential catastrophe that could happen at any time if individuals attempt to forcibly remove or destroy it, Judge Clarence Seeliger said in a ruling last June. The point of the removal is not to prevent its public display but instead as an appropriate measure to abate a public nuisance and protect the obelisk, he added. He ordered it removed and placed in storage until further notice. Days later, a large crane pulled down the obelisk as those gathered chanted, "Take it down! Take it down!" Others applauded. Next comes the tribute. This week, the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners unanimously approved the resolution to honor Lewis with a monument outside the courthouse where the obelisk stood. Lewis, a towering figure of the civil rights movement and a longtime U.S. congressman, died last July after a 6-month battle with cancer. John was a giant of a man, with a humble heart, Commissioner Davis Johnson said in a statement. He met no strangers and he truly was a man who loved the people and who loved his country, which he represented very well. He deserves this honor. Details about the memorial's design and installation have not been announced.